Hello, everybody, and you are very welcome to Successful Perspectives. Successful Perspectives, of course, is when we deep dive into the topic of leadership with somebody from our very selective network, Boardroom by EMIR. On this occasion, for this Successful Perspectives conversation, I am delighted to be joined by Fares Akkad, who is the Regional Director for Middle East and North Africa at Meta. Fares, it is a great pleasure to have you, and you're welcome to Successful Perspectives.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you, Trevor.
I have the great pleasure and privilege of deep diving into your brain now on the topic of leadership. And I've had the pleasure over the years of getting to know all of the regional bosses of Meta, then Facebook, right back to the first one. So I've been looking forward to this conversation to pick your brains a bit. So let's start off with leadership. How would you describe your main central tenets as you would define your leadership philosophy, Fares?
So I would say three main areas. One around people, strategy, and then day-to-day operation. So on people, I believe in looking at people holistically. So when you look at staff, we tend to deal with top talent we hire in the market, people who have choices to work elsewhere and have very specialized set of skills. And so it's very important to look at people as people and have a 360 view on their personal development needs, their skill sets, how they impact the company, and not just pigeonhole people in a specific role and or a specific set of criteria. And I found that works very well for motivating people, but also for retaining people when you look at their personal growth and dimensions. Two, when we look at anything we do, is focus on impact. We have a famous saying at Meta: it's don't confuse movement with momentum or impact. So some organizations have a tendency to get busy and lose perspective of impact or progress. So always with impact in mind, and reverse engineer any activity to what impact it's driving toward your goals. And then three is, especially in our business, is to plan what's coming after next. To kind of try to look around the corner and place bets. Not all of them will hit, but you absolutely have to continue to place bets because we are dealing at the cutting edge of trailblazing in human behavior when it comes to tech and its implication on society. And so it's monumental that we're constantly placing these bets.
I love it. You said something there. Let's just unpack something there. You said something very interesting to me. And this is these conversations are really just a great opportunity for me to steal great ideas from our very successful members, right? So you mentioned there, I love this idea of, when you're accessing or trying to attract the best talent, you don't want to pigeonhole people. You want to look at them holistically. From your point of view, what are some of the values that you try to assess or look at, the values that you deem that would help someone be most successful? When I'm hiring someone, I'm always looking for kind, smart, driven people. I just feel like since I've come onto that kind of philosophy and structured it into our personality assessments, everything, I've noticed it's like music playing in the company. Everything starts to flow. So when you're looking at talent or people, what are some of those kind of traits that tick the boxes for you?
Resourcefulness. I think it's, even as a large company, we're constantly asking people to work in, or at least experiment with limited resources. So somebody has to have this mentality of can-do and resourcefulness that I think is essential to get things off the ground. I think kindness goes a long way. I would agree with this. Even if you hire the smartest people, but they're not able to work with others or people resent them, it creates a uncollaborative environment, which ultimately harms the greater good. Tenacity and grit, almost to the point where it sometimes outweighs talent in places where you're onto a good idea, you have the right kind of skill sets in place, but you need someone to be persistent and try to correct things. And then what I say about looking at people holistically is you need to align passion. I think passion drives or ignites all of these characteristics I mentioned. So, people want to be resourceful, want to make things happen. So you have to, as much as possible, align this passion, which sometimes shifts, by the way, for talented people, shifts or it gets fine-tuned along the way, and you have to be in tune for that to adjust it. We hire people for specific jobs, but then we create jobs that never existed before. So we're hiring with a blank sheet. And so that's why these characteristics end up playing such a huge part in people's selection, and finding and doubling down on people's strengths. Rather than I'd rather double down on someone who is showing strengths in a particular area than try to build a weak area that would at best reach mediocre. Whereas you double down on someone's strength that can get to greatness is a lot more appealing.
I love it. Okay, that's my free consulting service there that I took there. Let's move back into leadership. Fares, I can tell by the answers you've given so far, you look at things in a very structured, methodical way. And with regards to your kind of leadership philosophy, do you get an opportunity to reflect on it often? How do you measure success? What does that kind of look like to you?
Yeah, I think you need to reflect on it all the time. And I think as you mature in your career, you also shape a certain leadership style that might be adequate for certain companies at a certain time, and not all companies at all times. So, case in point right now, there's some headwinds that are facing the tech industry in general. And, one of my also favorite books is Wartime CEO, Peacetime CEO. And I think that's absolutely a valid way to look at leadership. There are some leaders that are more fitting to turn around the company or to survive a storm. And there are some leaders that are more fitting for kind of rapid growth and experimentation and to strive in the better times. So it's important to reflect, and more important to also be self-aware and honest with yourself around where you are, the impact that you're driving at this point in time in the company, and where you can add value, and more importantly, where you can take away value if you're not careful with your approach.
I like it. On the point of self-awareness and honesty, if you were looking back to, say, Fares starting out his career, I won't say how many years ago, I won't age us, right? But if you were to think back to then, would you consider yourself a natural leader? Was it an inevitability that you would, be running a large organization over the region, or was it something that you felt that you had to develop yourself into? Was that you hear people saying there's natural leadership abilities. How would you define that in terms to you?
Assuming that there is a typical leader is in my opinion a fallacy. I think there's a stereotype of a leader, which for sure some people have it at a certain age, and I don't know if necessarily when I was young I saw myself that way as that stereotype leader who bosses people around or needs to be the center of attention and guiding people in what to do. And with that sense, I think that a leadership is an extremely unique and personal thing, and you develop it based on the need. So some of the greatest leaders I have had the pleasure to work with or observe were a product of their environment and found the best way to drive value at that particular point in time. And I don't think that's a one size fits all. So it's definitely something that, timing and circumstances, but also something you work on.
It's a great point, because this is reflected in that wonderful book from Good to Great, right? We have this almost a toxic attraction to what is deemed as some kind of leadership ability, which is often very bad for building long-term value in a company and its impact on the community, etc. Which brings me to another point in terms of how leadership style is and has evolved, say, over the last 20, 30 years. You know, in the past, it was very much driven around maximizing shareholder value and profitability. And of course, that remains, because you need organizations to be successful in order for them to continue to have an impact. And now it's very much shifting into, of course, creating the right culture for people to thrive and its impact on society. What's your take on how these goalposts are moving and how leaders should think about this?
Yeah, I would add another dimension to this, which is also, as you make your organization future-proof and you're hiring into the new generation, and I'm talking even, you know, millennials and Gen Zs, see the world in a very different place, in a very different way. And the type of organization they want to work with are also very different. They need to feel inspired. They need to feel affinity to the cause. And that goes against probably some of those typical traditional leadership styles that we were just describing. So I think moving forward, yes, people care about things like social responsibility, impact of the organization. The culture plays a huge part. They want to feel inspired by their leaders. They want to feel inspired by the career path. I've heard this from many millennials, mostly. Like, well, I look at my boss and my boss's boss, and I don't want to be them, which you know, by design makes the whole point kind of flawed, right? You want to be in an organization where you aspire to grow and you aspire to be at the helm. So I think making it your own, making it authentic, true, where people know that they're looking at you, they're looking at the real, you know, Fares, the real Trevor in what they're seeing, I think makes a huge difference and makes it a lot more sustainable for you as well as the leader.
One last question before we shift into having a little bit of fun with our rapid fire round. So if you were speaking to one of those members of that younger generation in terms of their place in the workplace, what do you consider the best piece of career advice that you've got that you would share with them?
So I would ask everyone to have a longer term view. So, you know, the good thing about the new generation, I find, is the ambition, sense of purpose, etc. One of the things that I think maybe we can all learn from the older generation is a bit of patience, and having a longer term view. So nothing is as good as it seems, as good as it seems, nor is it as bad as it seems, usually. So that's, you know, one advice I received from my dad, and I've seen many of the great leaders from across sectors, like investors, developers, entrepreneurs have. It's incredible how much people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. So if you keep this perspective, I think you'll have a much more even keel in how you look at things in life, which is important to have that emotional stability as you navigate the ups and downs.
I love it. And that's, you know, I give a lot of talks to visiting global CEOs, you know, and that's the thing I always say about the Middle East, to try and get them to understand, you know, when things are riding high now at the moment in the GCC particularly, right? And it's always a case of, look, it's not as good as it appears, but equally when there's this perception that the Middle East is going through this terrible period, it's also not as bad as it seems. There's always somewhere kind of sitting in the middle, which I love that idea. Fares Akkad, thank you very much for being on Successful Perspectives. It was a great pleasure to have you, and thanks for sharing your insights, and thanks for letting me just pick your brain on leadership. I think I'll get a lot of value from it, and our viewers will get a lot of value from it. So thank you.
My pleasure, Trevor, and thank you for everything you do. Honestly, I'm a member of many organizations, and this is the one that I feel in a good way pulls you in the most. So I think kudos are in order for all the effort that you put in, you and your team, to make this happen. It's a great network.
Well, that's my colleagues. I appreciate it, Fares.